Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Dear viewers, I welcome you all on the lecture number 4 on the interpretation of statutes. My name is Dr. Ajay Sonavne. I am the Assistant Professor, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. The title of our 4th lecture is the Principle of Internal Aids in the Interpretation, to the Interpretation. So, in this topic, what are we going to cover, that we will discuss first, because this principle of internal aid of interpretation, so what is basically inclusive of, and first thing that we will try to understand, that what do you mean by aids to the interpretation. That is again important principle or process that we have to understand. And in the process of this internal aid to the interpretation, what are the things that are basically assist the court to interpret the particular law that we have to cover. So first point, that is title, then short title, long title, preamble, headings, title of the chapter, marginal notes, definition, sections, subsections, punctuation, exceptions and saving clause, proviso, explanation, schedules. So these are the few important aspects which are available in any particular statutes or any act, so that helps the judiciary to interpret that particular law. So to begin with, as an introduction, that in the interpretation, as we all know, that it basically a job of the court to interpret the law. So to ascertain the true meaning of words used in the statutes, it's the first and prima facie the responsibility of the court, and also to determine the intention of legislature conveyed expressly or impliedly in the language used. So this to ascertain and to determine, ultimately to what? To interpret the particular statute. But now moving ahead, the Supreme Court in the KP Varghese versus Income Tax Officer in the year 1981 Supreme Court, wherein it has been mentioned by the court that the interpretation of statutes being an exercise in the ascertainment of meaning, everything which is logically relevant should be admissible, but an aid is a device that helps or assists. So for this purpose of construction and interpretation, the court has to take recourse to various internal and external aids. So dear viewers, the aids to interpretation of statutes. So it is very important, the word aid here denotes that helps or assist. So as a judge, when we pick up any particular statute, or as a lawyer we pick up any particular statute, then we look or we see certain pattern, or you can say certain in certain particular fashion this particular legislation is enacted, or it has been or you can say several like areas like title. What is the title of the act? What is the purpose or objective of the act? It has been mentioned in the act itself. But how to find that? How to understand that? So therefore, this internal aspects which are already present in the act, that basically helps as an individual to understand that particular legislation. So there are two modes of these aids of this interpretation of statutes. That is, first one is the internal aid and second one is the external aid. Internal aid is also called as the intrinsic aids, and external aids is also called as the extrinsic aids. So in this particular lecture we will try to understand that what is internal aids to the interpretation. Okay. So in the internal aids to the interpretation, these are the few, you can say, headings which we can see here. They are basically part and parcel of any particular statutes. So any statute which is inclusive of title, which is inclusive of preamble, which is inclusive of headings and marginal notes, then also sections, subsections, punctuations, illustration, exceptions, proviso, saving clause, explanation and also the schedules. So this is basically which is the part and parcel of the act, and this internally helps the interpretation of the statutes to the courts, because external aids to the interpretation are such, you can say, elements or such process which helps the judiciary to interpret the law which are not mentioned in the act. But here the internal aids to the interpretation basically helps to the judiciary to interpret the law or to interpret that particular act, wherein these principles are internally present in the act itself. Only judge has to understand, judge has to give the importance as per the need and time, or as per the ambiguity or vagueness which is not, or you can say which is unclear in the provisions of the act. So let us start with the first one, that is title. So what do you mean by title, and how that title basically gives the scope for the interpretation, or how the title basically assists the interpretation of the statute. So first one, statutes usually have two titles, that is one is the short title and second one is the long title. The short title is basically a short form of the full statute used for the purpose of briefness, and the latter, that is long title, along with the preamble, states out the objective and purposes of the act. So statute generally contains of these two kind of title. One is the short title and second one is the long title. We will take also example that how this short title or long title are present in the any particular legislation. So statutes when referred is always known by its short title, and short title has no interpretative value because short title is basically the title of the act, title of the statutes. So it has no interpretative value. It is just a title. Like if any movie is there, so movie has a particular name. So similarly, act has a particular name. It does not have a interpretive value. So based on the name, you cannot interpret the whole movie, or based on the name, you cannot interpret the statute. So therefore, title is just to have a particular name to that particular act. So the short title, if we see, is an act only its name and is given solely for the purpose of facility of reference or the identification. So like every individual has its own name. Similarly, act has its own name. Further, short title is mentioned under like section 1 in most of the cases and ends with the year of passing of the act, and section 1, like for example of Indian Contract Act, that gives the idea about what is the short title. Now every act is, this is just one example we are taking here now. So even though it is a part of a statute, it has no role to play while interpreting the provisions of the act. Neither it extend nor it can delimit the clear meaning of particular provision, because sometimes if the judiciary is interpreting any law, interpreting any act, if they come across some unclear words, if they come across certain ambiguous word or certain vagueness in the interpretation, so they cannot take the assistance of for the interpretation from the short title. Okay, so this is an example wherein the, if you see this particular act, so this is the picture of the Indian Contract Act 1872, and wherein the, you can see here the section 1 talks about the short title, and the act may be called as Indian Contract Act 1872. So this is, in this particular fashion, the Parliament or state legislature incorporate the short title in particular legislation. So section 1 of the Indian Contract Act deals with the short title, and this act may be called as Indian Contract Act. So it has no interpretative value, as I mentioned. It is simply denoting what is the name of that particular act. Okay, moving ahead, another example here, the Information Technology Act 2000. Again, if you see section 1, that deals with the short title, and this act may be called as Information Technology Act 2000. Okay, so section 1 and especially the subclause 1 of that section, that deals with the short title of that respective act. So it does not give you the idea that this act is enacted for what purpose, what is the idea behind that, what is the history behind that. It's simply given you the name of the act. Then there comes second category, long title. So what do you mean by long title? So long title here, it basically helps to give the general description about the object of the act. So here the long title has certain value which gives us the object of that particular act, which gives us the purpose of that act, why this act is enacted, what is the idea behind that act, what this act is going to serve for the benefits of the people. So therefore, however, this long title is not, or that the way it is mentioned in the act, it does not give the conclusive proof, but obviously we have to take into consideration the provisions of whole act. But that long title gives us the why this provision has been prepared in this particular fashion. So therefore, yes, it is giving us the idea that why this act is enacted, what is the purpose of act, but that is not conclusive, but it rarely helps during the ambiguity between the statutory provision. So for example, Civil Procedure Code, what it mentions, an act to consolidate and amend the laws relating to the procedure of the courts of civil judicature, right? So this is the long title. This is an example of long title. So in the Civil Procedure Code, it mentioned that it is an act to consolidate and amend laws relating to the procedure of courts of civil procedure. So here what we can understand It is just simply we can understand that it is an act which consolidated all the civil proceedings together and amend the law associated with that. But it does not give any value that what is the procedure, how the procedure has to be followed, what are the steps in that procedure, what one procedure, if someone does not follow the process and someone miss some things, then what is the solution for that? So for that we need to go for the solution or that provision of that particular act. So therefore every statute is headed by long title and generally it begins with the an act 2, and sometimes long title have been used by the courts to interpret certain provisions of the statutes, because there are certain situation arises wherein this long title basically helps to understand the objective behind act, helps to understand the why this particular act is enacted. So if we again see, it is a part of statutes and it cannot override plain and clear meaning from the enactment. So if the provisions in the act are very clear, if the provisions in the section, if the section is very clear, then one does not need to go and see what is mentioned in the preamble. So it will not override the clear provision or the unambiguous provisions. But in the absence of preamble, it is a good guide regarding the object, scope or purpose of act, because every act may not have the preamble, but every act will have the object, the long title, which will denotes that what is the object and purpose of that act, like the constitution has the preamble, so that gives us the idea about the purpose of behind that particular constitution. But act will consist of long title, and long title will give us the idea about the object behind that particular act. So here an example, here the Consumer Protection Act 2019, and in this particular act, if you see this particular para, that is nothing but the long title. Okay, so what it mentioned, as I mentioned, that it begins with the an act 2. Okay, so an act to provide for the protection of the interest of consumers and for the said purpose to establish authorities for timely and effectively administration and settlement of consumer dispute and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Okay, so the Consumer Protection Act is inclusive of this long title, and in this long title the object and purpose of the Consumer Protection Act is very clearly mentioned. That is, number 1, to protect the rights of consumer, to establish the redressal mechanism, and also plus to have the authorities who can timely administer the Consumer Protection Act 2019. And also you can see here is that Article 1 also deals with the short title, like this act may be called as the Consumer Protection Act 2019. Okay, so here this few aspects are there, but this basically helps the, you can say, to judges or also the legislature to understand that why this particular act is enacted. As a lawyer, why this particular act is enacted, what is the aim of this particular act. So there are certain landmark judgments in this regard which has given the importance to the long title of the respective act, because sometimes its situation arises wherein when the provision of a particular act is not clear or provision leads to some ambiguity, then long title helps to understand that why this provision is mentioned in this particular fashion, because we cannot simply read the provision in isolation. We have to understand the object, purpose behind that provision, that why this provision is mentioned in this particular manner, and for that purpose we have to go for the long title. Okay, so there is this case, Popatlal Shah versus State of Madras, 1953 Supreme Court case, wherein the title of this Madras General Sales Tax Act 1939 was utilized to show that the object of the act is to impose taxes on sales, and that take place within the province. Further, there is another example which is very important, that is Right of Children for Free and Compulsory Education Act 2019. So wherein the Supreme Court also relied to get the validity of this particular legislation or to have the strength of this particular legislation. It has been enacted by the Parliament to give the effect to the right of child to education as enshrined under Article 21A and the Constitution. And the word free and compulsory, it is present in the title or also in the long title, that basically shows that why this particular act is enacted and what is the purpose behind that. Okay, so that every child who may be poor or may not have the economic conditions, so government through several schemes provide the education to the children which is free and compulsory in nature. Again, there is another example, that is Manohar Lal versus State of Punjab, 1961 Supreme Court case, wherein there was one shopkeeper he was having this shop of this Imperial Book Depot. So he was having the shop of books, and there was one particular act which which as a shopkeeper everyone has to follow or everyone has to adhere to. So the title of the act is the Punjab Trade Employees Act 1940. Okay. So as per this particular act and section 7 of this act, if you read here, that it says that save as otherwise provided by this act, every shop or commercial establishment shall remain closed on a closed day. Now that means that every shop or commercial establishment shall remain closed on a closed day, but even the act has given a liberty further. It says that the choice of closed day shall rest with the occupier of the shop or the commercial establishment. So the choice will be given to the shopkeeper or that commercial establishment person that when that shop has to be closed, okay, and shall be intimated to the prescribed authority within 2 months after of the date on which this act comes into force. So he will decide now, he has a choice that in a week which day you have to close the shop, what would be the correct date. So the here appellant, that is Manohar Lal, decided that shop will remain closed on every Friday. So every Friday shop will remain closed. So this is the fact. But one day what happened, that he basically kept the shop open, right? And when he kept the shop open, especially on Friday, and his son was selling the books in that particular shop, even he was present. So the inspector visited the appellant shop on Friday, that is 29 January 1954, and found that shop is open. Now this is basically violating the section 16 of the act. What it says, subject to the other provisions of this act, whoever contravenes any of the provisions of this act then shall be liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 25 rupees for the first offence and 100 rupees for every subsequent offence. So according to section 16, if someone violates any provisions of this act, he will be punished by the law. Like 25 rupees will be fine at the first offence, and it will be continued further for the further offence of rupees 100 rupees. Now the question here arises that when the inspector found that shop is open, so here Manohar Lal or the appellant made a contention by saying that this act or the title, long title which is mentioned in this particular act has no particular value and the provisions which are related with this are not correct one. So what he mentioned, that the long title of the act was really outside the purview of the legislation and could not be said to serve the purpose for which act was enacted. So his argument was that because see, what is the reason behind to keeping a shop closed one day in a week? What is the reason behind that? So why the provision is mentioned in this particular fashion? Section 7 of this particular act, it says that shop shall remain closed one day in a week, and that is also with the help of choice of the shopkeeper. So there is a justification or purpose behind enactment of this legislation which is present in the long title. And what is the long title says? It says that an act to limit the hours of work of shop assistants and commercial employees and to make certain regulation concerning their holidays, wages, terms of service, and pointed out to be instances the appellant to close his shop in which there were no employees. So here if you see here again, the act is basically limiting the hours of workers of shop assistants. This line is very important because this act is basically trying to protect the health of the workers, so that in whole week if worker is coming for the work every day, so it will be difficult for him to on his particular health from the health point of view. So therefore the court rejected this argument that is advanced by the appellant, that is Manohar Lal, by stating that this long title is not relevant. So therefore court observed that the ratio of the legislation is a social interest in the health of the worker who forms an essential part of the community and in whose welfare the community is vitally interested. It is in the light of this purpose that provisions of the act have to be scrutinized. So having holiday, like one day holiday in a week, it is basically fulfilling the object or the purpose which is mentioned in the long title, and there is nothing wrong in that. So therefore Justice Iyengar in this particular case observed that the long title of the act, on which learned counsel has placed considerable reliance as a guide for the determination of the scope of the act and the policy underlying the legislation. No doubt it indicated the main purposes of the enactment, but cannot obviously control the express operative provisions of the act. So definitely it will not give the extension of meaning to any act or any provisions of the act, but at least it will give the why this particular provision is enacted in this particular fashion. Okay. So next part comes, or next internal aids category comes, that is preamble. Now preamble is nothing but again a reflection of the scope, object, purpose of the act with more clarity. Every act may not have the preamble because long title generally covers this particular aspect of the preamble, but here in this case of this Burakkar Coal Company Limited versus Union of India, AR 1961, Justice Mudolkar observed that it is one of the cardinal principle of the construction that where the language of act is clear, right, the preamble must be disregarded, though where the object of meaning of an enactment is not clear, the preamble may resorted to explain it, and the preamble may be used to indicate to what particular instances the enactment is intended to apply, right. So the importance of preamble arises when the words of the text or act is not clear, otherwise preamble will not have that value. So under the Constitution of India, as we all are well versed, wherein the preamble is generally called as a reflection of the complete constitution, and as you know that the preamble was written at the end once the constitution was prepared. So preamble assumes the great significance, and also there was a debate whether the preamble was the part of the constitution or not. But yes, the preamble is the part of the constitution, and preamble, the words which are mentioned in the preamble, every word assumes certain significance, and that gives the clear idea about the what is the expectation from the constitution, what is the expectation from the machinery of the constitution, or what is the expectation for what is the expectation from the people who have accepted this preamble as a binding authority over all. So therefore, if you just highlight some of the word like we the people of India, who like it shows that it is the supreme authority, like beyond everything or like beyond other organs whichever we have, people that comes first and who has accepted to abide by this constitution. So having solemnly resolved to the constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure all its citizens, what is the aim? Justice, social in the nature of social, economic, political, liberty, that is thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, then equality of status and opportunity, and to promote among all fraternity, that is assuring the dignity of individual and unity and integrity of the nation. And in our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day, November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact and give ourselves to this constitution. So we the people of India have accepted to follow this particular constitution or adhere to the rules of particular constitution, and that is the strength, that is the power of the preamble. So also there are certain landmark judgments which are associated with the concept of preamble. So there is a case Tribhuvan Prakash Nayyar versus Union of India, wherein the section 5 of the Displaced Person Supplementary Act 1954 has conferred power to Chief Settlement Commissioner to revise any verified claim. Okay, read carefully what it says. It conferred the power to Chief Settlement Commissioner to revise any verified claim. Okay, so term verified claim, which means that like as a officer, when the suppose some application that comes to him, suppose some claim comes to him, so with the help of his power, he verify that particular claim and approves or disagree with the same. So once he verified, he has the power to again revise that verification. Okay, so here it is this verified claim defined under section 2, which means that any claim registered under the Displaced Persons Claim Act 1950, right? But there is one more supplementary act is enacted, and with the preamble of that supplementary act, it states that it was enacted to provide for the disposal of certain proceedings pending under 1950 Act and for the matters therewith. Now here the argument was put up in a way that it says that an argument was put up by this appellant stating that on the basis of preamble, the power of revision under the supplementary act was limited to the pending proceeding and verified claim which had become the final after the revision by the Chief Claim Commissioner under the 1950 Act could not be reopened. So according to the argument that is put up by the applicant is that once the claim is verified by the chief claims of commissioner, then it cannot be reopened, it cannot be revised, it cannot be re-looked by the commissioner. But however, the contention was rejected by the court and stated that the section 2F and also the read with section 5 of this act, it clearly says that a preamble is only a key to open the minds of legislature, but it cannot be used to control or qualify the precise or unambiguous language of the enactment. So if in the enactment, when the section 5 clearly gives the power to revise the verified claim to the chief commissioner officer, so that means he has a clear power to reopen any claim which is already fixed by him or which is already decided by him. We cannot take the help of the preamble of the supplementary act, and with that preamble we try to interpret something which is not right. So therefore, if the section is very clear, then there is no need to refer the preamble just for the, or you can say it cannot be misused for the other purposes. So again, there are these two landmark judgments we can see here, that is Keshwanand Bharati, wherein the court relied on the preamble of the Constitution of India in reaching to the conclusion that the power of the Parliament to amend the Constitution under Article 368 was not unlimited and did not enable the Parliament to alter the basic structure of the Constitution. So they have a power, it is limited in a sense that they have to amend, they can amend the Constitution to any extent, but only without violating the basic structure of the Constitution. Similarly, another case here is the A.C. Sharma versus Delhi Administration 1973, wherein the appellant challenged the conviction under section 5 of the Prevention of Corruption Act 1947, and his main contention was that the establishment of Delhi police establishment, after the establishment of this Delhi special police establishment, the anti-corruption department of the Delhi police has ceased to have a power of investigating bribery case, because the preamble of Delhi Special Police Act 1946 pointed out this effect. So when this act came into existence, so matter will be now go to the authorities which are mentioned under the Prevention of Corruption Act. But the court, however, did not accept this argument, which is based on that no preamble can interfere with the clear and ambiguous word of the statutes, right? So now moving ahead, we'll see another category, that is headings. So headings and the title are nothing but, or we are talking about headings in such a way that in any act there are certain sections and every section has certain headings. So we are talking about headings of that particular section, okay? So heading or title prefixed to sections or subsections can be referred in construing the act of the legislature. So conflicts of opinion towards the importance of heading that generally comes because some expert says that there is no value to the headings, but at the same time some may interpret the headings in a such a manner that creates some values to the headings and that may lead to some different interpretation. But at the same time it helps to interpret certain clauses, because through the headings we understand that this particular provision is for what purpose, what is the purpose behind which this particular provision has been given such heading. So we have one example also here. This is an Information Technology Act, and there is a chapter 2 which is titled as Digital Signature and Electronic Signature. So this is a title that is given by Act itself to the chapter number 2. So under the chapter number 2, whatever the laws which are associated with the digital signature and the electronic signature will be present under the chapter 2, and there are certain sections which are there under the chapter 2. So there you can see, for an example, section number 3 or section 3A. Section 3 deals with the authentication of electronic record, and section 3A deals with the electronic signature. So this is nothing but the heading of the section. So from the heading what we can understand that this section 3A deals with the electronic signature. But how to interpret that? Is there anything which helps us from the title that we can analyze, we can understand? No. So electronic signature is simply the heading of that particular section. What that section is inclusive of, we have to refer that section as a whole. But however, there is one interesting case, Union of India versus National Federation of the Blind, and in this particular case even the headings became an important piece of interpretation, you can say, and that created some doubts or that advanced certain argument before the court. So there was a section 33 of Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities and Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act 1995, which is titled as Reservation of Posts, and provides that the title of this section 33 is the reservation of post. What it provides? It provides that every appropriate government shall appoint in every establishment such percentage of vacancies not less than 3% for a persons or class of persons with disability. Okay, so it is a power of government to appoint under the every establishment a particular percentage of vacancies not less than 3% for the person who are disabled. Now it was contended that this interpretation of this section, what is the title of this section, is the reservation of post, and what is the provision which says that there are certain particular percentage of vacancy will be kept for the disabled people. So it was contended that the reservation of persons with disability is post based and not vacancy based, relying on the heading of the section. So here the disabled person argued in such a manner that the section titled as reservation of post. So according to the argument which is advanced before the court, which says that this reservation of person with disability is post based. So it basically generate the post which is like 3%. But the court interpreted this law in a very simple manner, because reservation of post is just a title. It cannot create the post. This section is basically talking about only the vacancy, only the particular vacancies will be kept as a reservation from the post which are already created. Only when the advertisement will come, 3% vacancy will be given to the, or 3% vacant seat will be remain you can reserved for the disabled people, but it cannot create a separate post, right? So the Supreme Court very clearly mentioned that the simple and unambiguous language of the section 33, that computation of reservation has to be against the total number of vacancy in the establishment and not against the identified post. Okay, there is one more case, that is NC Dhondilal versus Union of India, AIR 2004 SC 1272, wherein the headings of section 36(2), which of the Protection of Human Rights Act 1994, which is titled as matters not subject to jurisdiction of the commission. So it was interpreted that the period of 1 year prescribed in that section was not nearly a procedure provision, but took away the jurisdiction of commission to inquire into a matter after expiry of that period. So here the court observed that it is settled rule of interpretation that the section, heading or marginal note can be relied upon only when, if any doubt or ambiguity in interpretation of the provision, and try to discern the legislative intent. Okay, so now next point comes, that is marginal notes. So in the marginal notes, as it has no weightage for the construing the section, but however Justice Patanjali Shastri in the CIT versus Ahmed Bhai Umar Bhai and Company case, wherein he was mentioned that the marginal notes in an Indian statutes as an act of parliament cannot be referred for the purposes of construing the statutes, and it cannot control the meaning of the body or meaning of the provisions as well, because marginal notes are simply there which can be used in very rare or exceptional cases which is permissible to interpret. So therefore, in the case of Bombay Dyeing versus Bombay Environmental Action Group 2006, wherein it was mentioned that although a marginal note may not be determinate of the content of the provision, it may act as an intrinsic aid to the construction. And in the interpretation of statutes, marginal notes are not used because most of these notes are inserted by the draftsman, okay, and not by the legislature, and not even under the instruction of the legislature. So draftsman, while preparing the law, once the legislature has passed the law, so marginal notes became the part and parcel of the act. Now another point comes which is very important, that is definitions. So every act is basically consisting of definitions, and definition of certain sections, words which are used in that particular section, and this term definition assumes a great significance, because if you open particular act like Information Technology Act for an example, there is a word used information, there is word used technology, there is word which has been used together, information technology. So what is the meaning of that? How to interpret that? Because information in a layman perspective, it is just for the knowledge that someone has given some information to another one. But information from the Information Technology Act perspective, how we can understand? It is the act which defines that particular word. So similarly, definition of certain words and expression used in the statutes, and once that word, suppose if it is the Information Technology Act, then how to define word information? if it is defined under section 2, then that word will be interpreted with the same meaning throughout the act. Okay. So to avoid the necessity of frequent repetition, describing all the subject matter to which word or expression so defined intended to apply. So if definition gives the definition of particular word, that word will be applicable throughout the act in a similar manner. So in case of Bhagwati Developer versus Peerless General Finance Investment, the Supreme Court held that when the word securities has been defined under the Security Contract Regulation Act 1956, its meaning would not vary when the same word is used at more than one place in the same statute, as otherwise it will defeat the very object of the definitive section. So securities word, if it is defined in the act, it will be applicable in a similar manner throughout the act, throughout the complete legislation. And during the enactments, it may use that definitions from earlier act, because sometimes if the act is amended, act is no supplementary act is made, so the same words are there, then that can be the earlier act can be helpful to define that particular word. The same will have that the words will have a similar value, or definition will still be prevalent. So therefore, in this case, that is Keshav Lal Khemchand and Sons Private Limited versus Union of India in the year 2015, the Supreme Court observed that while it has been a practice of legislative bodies following the British parliamentary practice to define the certain words employed in given statutes for a proper appreciation of understanding of scheme and purpose of the act, in the event of statute does not contain the definition of particular expression employed in it, it becomes a duty of courts to expound the meaning of the undefined expression in accordance with the well established rule of statutory interpretation. So sometimes situation arise wherein the word is not defined in the act itself. Then in that case, what can be done? So in that case, it is the duty of the courts to expound the meaning of a rule's undefined expressions in accordance with the well established rules of statutory interpretation. So there are two categories of definition. So if you see here, there is the one definition is the restrictive category of definition, and one other is the extensive category of definition. So what do you mean by restrictive category of definition? So in the restrictive category of definition, generally definition that begins with the to mean. Okay. So for an example, if you see section 2F of the Domestic Protection of Women from the Domestic Violence Act 2005, which defines the term domestic relationship. So what do you mean by this? So if you see, as it begins with the domestic relationship to mean, right? So to mean a relationship between two persons who live or have at any point of time lived together in a shared household when they are related to the conjugality, marriage, or through the relationship in the nature of marriage, adoption, family members which live together as a joint family. So here there are in the domestic, what is the meaning of domestic relationship? That has been given in the 5 categories. So that 5 categories are basically, you can say, are the exhaustive since the expression means has been used. Okay, so in the case of Indra Sarma versus VKV Sarma, the court has given this definitional clause some interpretative values and stating that 5 categories of relationship is exhaustive since the expression has used means. And further, now when you come to the second one, that is the extensive definition. So here the word used to include. So in the definition, in the, as we can see in the restrictive definition, it is the word that has been used is the to mean, and in the extensive definition, the word that has been used is to include. Now to include it, as you can see the example like Article 129 of the Constitution, wherein the including the powers to punish for contempt of itself. It nothing but shows that the Supreme Court, which is the court of record, and they have a power to punish if someone has committed a contempt. So in addition to the lower court or high court, even they have a power to look at the contempt which is happened in their own court. Then section 2(1) of the Consumer Protection Act 1986, which is inclusive the definition of service, which was held that to include the housing construction even before this service was included in the expressly amendment in 1993. And the inclusive definition of lease, now here it is important to remember that word lease, which is mentioned in the section 2 of Stamp Act, and the word lease which is mentioned under section 105 of Transfer of Property Act, having the different interpretation, having the different meaning, because act is different and both act has their own different meaning. So therefore it includes what that is again depend on the relevant section. or relevant act. Then there comes next category, that is punctuation. So punctuation is another, you can say, aspect of the internal aids to the interpretation of the statutes. And in the punctuation, the clarity and the precision that basically reflects in writing, it basically allow the writer to stop, pause, or give emphasis on certain parts of the sentence. In ancient era, if you see certain acts, in that era this punctuation had no evidential, or you can say interpretative value, but in the present or in the recent era, in the modern era, even punctuation sometimes assumes the great significance. And further, the court first look at the provision as they are punctuated, and if they feel that there is no ambiguity while interpreting the punctuated provision, they shall interpret it. So punctuation sometimes may not make a big difference, but sometimes it also makes a big difference, because if the court feels a repugnancy or any ambiguity in the section, then court shall read the whole provision without any punctuation, and if the meaning is clear, it will interpret it without attaching any importance whatsoever that punctuation may be. So there was this case, that is Mohammad Shabir versus State of Maharashtra, wherein the section 27 of the Drugs and Cosmetic Act 1947 was in question. So this provision says that, if you read carefully, it says that whoever manufactures for the sale, whoever manufactures for the sale, sells, stocks, or exhibits for a sale or distributes a drug without license would be liable for the punishment. So here, what is wrong, or what is liability that comes if someone commits this particular wrong, or liability is on which act? So here, manufacturing for sale, it is the main concern. If someone keeping the stock or exhibit or keeping the stock, that is not basically a crime. So therefore court has mentioned that mere stocking of a drug is not offense, and the offense is made out only when stocking is for the sale. So if you are keeping the stock of the drugs and cosmetics, there is no offense, but if you are making it out for the sale, then that is the offense. So therefore, if you read the section carefully, whoever manufactures for the sale, then a stock or exhibit, or basically the keeping the stock is not offense, bringing out that stock for the sale, that is the offense. And this basically helps because of this punctuation which has been used here, because punctuation basically we have to understand and interpret in a correct manner. Otherwise, if someone read that statement in a complete or full manner, he may misinterpret that section. Again, there is a case, that is Shambhunath Sarkar versus State of West Bengal, wherein the Supreme Court held that the word which used twice in Article 22(7) of the Constitution, followed by the comma after each, was to be read consecutively and because of the context so required. Then there is a Ashwini Kumar versus Arvind Bose case, wherein the Supreme Court mentioned that punctuation cannot be regarded as a controlling element and cannot be allowed to control the plain meaning of a text. The next category comes in the internal aid, that is illustration. Illustration is nothing but the examples, and there are certain criminal laws, or you can say the several criminal laws or even other acts wherein they are consisting of examples, because sometimes sections may not give the clear idea. Then with the help of examples, one may have to interpret the section, one may have to understand the section, one may have to one may have to take out the meaning of that section. So therefore, illustration which is given by the act itself, also a better explanation to understand that particular provision. So illustrations is a good guide to find out the intention of the framers, but an enactment otherwise clear cannot be given extended or restricted meaning on the basis of illustration. So if the section is very clear, it is not ambiguous, it is not you can say creating any unclarity, so in that case one can directly refer the section, no need to go for the illustration. But if the section is very hard to understand, then one can refer the section illustration, and with the help of illustration he can try to interpret that every word of that section. So therefore, in the Mudaliar Chatterjee versus International Film Company, it was observed that construing a section, an illustration cannot be ignored or brushed aside. So even illustration has some value during the interpretation. And also there is one legal maxim, that is exempla illustrant non registrangent legem, which means that only illustrate but do not narrow the scope of rule of law. So when illustration is given which is attached to the particular section, it cannot narrow the scope of that legislation or narrow the scope of that section. It can assist, it can give the correct meaning, but it cannot be narrowed down. So therefore, in the case of Muhammad Saidul Arifin versus Ya Uyghur, wherein it was held that illustrations are of relevance and the value in construction of the text of the section, although they do not form the part of the section. So therefore, they should not be readily rejected as a repugnant to the section. So one cannot directly remove that particular section. Then Supreme Court in again Maheshchandra Sharma versus Rajkumari Sharma observed that illustration is the part of section and it helps to illustrate the principle of the section. However, illustration cannot be used to defeat the provision or modify the language of the section. Okay. The next point comes, that is exception and saving clause. Now exceptions are something which is very important aspect when it comes to the criminal law, or even sometimes different act that we have, wherein the section which is mentioned or the crime suppose which has been committed, like in the nature of defamation or in the nature of murder. So every statement which is made may not be defamatory statement. There are certain statement which is an exception. So therefore, if you take an example wherein the section 499 of the old Indian Penal Code or the section 354 of the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, which defines what is defamation, it also consists of some 10 exceptions wherein which do not amount the defamation. And similarly, like the crime of murder, also it assists with the certain exception. So every act may not be concluded as a murder, or every death will not be concluded as a murder. So there are certain exceptions, like we have to go with the background of that case, intention, motive, object, other aspect also needs to be consideration. And also in case of defamation, we may have to consider the exceptions, such as if the statement is truth, if statement has some evidential value, statement is substantiated with some proof, then in that case that defamation may not remain a defamatory statement and the person need not come under this particular section or need not provide any kind of apology. So therefore, exception generally added to the enactment with the purpose of exempting something which would otherwise fall within the ambit of main provision. An exception affirms that things not exempted are covered under the main provision. And in case of repugnancy between an operative part and exception, the operative part must be relied on. Then some decisions have however been given on the principle that an exception, being the latter will of the legislature, and must prevail over the substantive portion of the enactment. So there is also one judgment, that is Director of Secondary Education versus Pushpendra Kumar, wherein the Supreme Court has observed that a provision in the nature of exception cannot be so interpreted as to subserve the main enactment and thereby nullify the right conferred by the main enactment. So yes, the exception definitely has some value, but it cannot override the main provision. And there is a saving clause also, which is generally appended in cases of the repeal and reenactment of the statutes, and by this the rights already created under the repealed enactment are not disturbed, nor new rights are created by it. A saving clause is normally inserted in the repealing statutes, and in case if there is a clash between the main part of statutes and the saving clause, the saving clause has to be rejected. And also there are two landmark cases which are associated with that. One is the Shah Bhojraj Kuverji Oil Mills versus Subhash Chandra Yogaraj Sinha, that the Supreme Court did not allow the use of saving clause which was enacted like a proviso to determine whether section in act was retrospective in operation. And in another case, Agriculture and Processed Food Products versus Union of India, the Supreme Court, while interpreting the saving clause in Export Control Order 1988, held that a clause only saved the rights which were in existence before the order and was issued. It did not confer any new rights which were not existence at that time. Then next point we have is the proviso. So proviso is something that is generally mentioned in the act, like provided that. It begins or it starts with the statement provided that. So it is basically to accept something from enacting clause or to limit its applicability, to qualify something or to exclude something from what is provided in the enactment, but for proviso it would be within the purview of enactment. And proviso is not to be taken absolutely in a strict sense, but At the same time, if it basically limits the ambition of particular act. So any particular section, if it is attached with the word proviso or some attached with the word like provided that, then it basically limits the scope, limits some ambition of that particular legislation or particular section. Then explanation, again that is another internal aid of interpretation. An explanation basically are something which explain the words which are mentioned in the act. So it is different from definition. So definition is something that is generally we find out in the section 2 of any act, but explanation we find out at the end of the same section, which is suppose it is section 5 of any act. Then if there are words which are critical, which are new words, so that will be explained under that section itself with the title explanation. So it basically gives the meaning of word, and plus the meaning to be given to the explanation must depend upon the terms, and no theory or its purpose can be entertained unless it is to be involved from the language. So to include something within all, to explain something from the connotation of some words occurring in it. So in the explanation, there is a Sundaram Pillai versus Patta Birman versus in the 1985 Supreme Court case, wherein Justice Faisal Ali has laid down certain objective of an explanation as a statutory interpretation. So how the explanation basically assists the court during the interpretation of statutes. So basically it explains the meaning and intendment of the act. There is any obscurity or vagueness in the main enactment, or to clarify the same as to make it consistent with the dominant object, or to provide an additional support to the dominant object of the act. An explanation can't in any way interfere or change the enactment or any part thereof, but where some gap is left which is relevant for the purpose of explanation in order to suppress the mischief and advance the object of the act. Further, also there are two more objective that is defined by Justice Faisal Ali, that to help or assist the court in interpreting the true purpose and intendment of the enactment, and it cannot however take away the statutory right with which any person under the statute has been clothed or set at naught the working of an act by becoming an hindrance in the interpretation of the same. And the another aspect which is relevant when it comes to the internal aid, that is schedules. So scheduled is basically generally we find out at the end of the any particular act, or like in the constitution also we find there are schedules which are attached to the main document of constitution. So they are basically gives some force to the section. So the content, details and the forms of working out the policy underlined in the section of the statutes. So if the section will give you the policy, section will gives you the some structure, and how to implement that will be, or in what category that section will be applicable, that you can find in the schedule. So therefore even in the conflict between body of act and the schedule, it is always the act will prevail. And there is the example like 7th schedule of the Constitution of India, which is inclusive of union list, state list and concurrent list, that basically gives us the different areas or entries which shows that on what areas the parliament can enact the legislation, parliament or state legislature can enact the legislation, or with the help of concurrent list, again on what basis they can both together can enact the legislation on a particular topic. So this areas has been divided between this union list, state list and concurrent list. Concurrent list is for both union and state, and other two is independently for their respective areas. So in the conclusion, I would like to conclude by saying that this aids to the interpretation of statutes, that assumes a great importance, because these are internally whatever aids that is available for the you can say parties, or also for the judges, or also for the lawyers. This basically helps to interpret law in a better manner. It also helps and assists the judiciary to interpret the law in a conclusive manner. It also assists during ambiguity or vagueness in the provision if it is there. And every category of internal aid has its own identity in the act, and the purpose is always there behind that particular act. So this internal aids to the interpretation that definitely assist the judiciary to interpret the law, also to interpret the section and the areas such as the title, or you may say if there are two categories like short title and long title, again there is a headings, again there is a schedules, and there is explanation. There are again variety of internal aids which basically helps to the judges to understand what is the minute things in the act, and plus what is the purpose behind that, even for the lawyers or learners like us, that gives us the new ideas behind that how this internal aids basically assist. And further here, if you see that if there are certain words which are ambiguous and vague, then in that sense that there are some internal aids may not be applicable in every situation or every case. But if the words are ambiguous, if the words are vague in the particular act or particular legislation, then in that case the internal aids we need to refer. Like for example, if the preamble of the any particular act, or the you can say the short title of that act, or in that case the explanation or maybe illustration, so these are definitely a part of the act as an internal aid. But when and how it has to be used, it depends upon the situation, it depends upon the case to case, or it depends upon the wordings of the provision of that respective act. So therefore every category definitely assumes the importance in the internal aids. It may not be applicable always in all the circumstances, but it may be applicable in the circumstances where there are words which are not clear, which are ambiguous, which are you can say vague words, or wherein the court may find it difficult to interpret that particular law. So in addition to that, this is like one category we have discussed, but also there is another category of external aids, wherein the court may go beyond that particular act, beyond the particular legislation, and beyond the wording of the act, or you can say rather the certain processes which are applicable while interpretation of statutes. So this basically a helping hand for the judiciary, this basically a helping hand for the lawyers, for the students, for the learners, or for the academician when they are interpreting a particular statutes. So in this, I hope with this, in this particular lecture you will understand that this interpretation of internal aids, or the internal aids, how it helps to the interpretation of any statutes. But at the same time you have to remember that every act may not have certain elements which is mentioned here, because every act may not have an explanation, every act may not have the long title, every act may not have the you can say examples, illustration which is mentioned there. So it depends upon the what nature of statutes we are talking about, what nature of act we are talking about, what nature of statutes which we are talking about, because depends upon the statutes, its application, its content, its internal principle, that basically helps. So with this I conclude my lecture, and I thank you all of you for listening to it. So thank you.